The blizzard didn't come with a warning. It came the way death always does, quietly, then all at once. By the time Stone Mallister's headlight cut through the wall of white on Route 9 outside Blue Ridge, Montana, the temperature had dropped 23 degrees in 4 hours. The kind of cold that doesn't just freeze skin. It finds the cracks in a man's chest and fills them with ice. Stone had survived Fallujah. He had survived Kandahar. He had survived burying his daughter on a Tuesday morning when the sky was the wrong shade of blue and nobody thought to warn him that grief doesn't end. It only changes shape. But nothing prepared him for the purple mitten, small, bright, impossibly purple against 30 inches of snow, and beneath it, a child. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when a broken man remembers why he's still alive, keep watching. Because this story is going to take everything you think you know about bikers, about family, and about what it means to be saved, and it's going to burn it all down. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because we release new stories every week and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Drop a like on this video if you're already feeling this, and leave a comment telling me what city and country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The Iron Guardians weren't supposed to be on Route 9 that night. The chapter's annual winter run had been scheduled for the following weekend, but Hawk Mercer, road captain, former Army Ranger, and the only man Stone Mallister trusted with navigation and his life in that order, had called an audible at 6 in the evening. The weather report was bad. The weather outside was worse. But Hawk had a habit of reading storms the way other men read maps, and something about this particular system made the back of his neck go tight in the way it used to when a patrol was about to go sideways in places that didn't appear on any official document. "We ride now," Hawk had said, standing in the doorway of the Iron Guardians clubhouse, his breath coming out in visible clouds even indoors. "Weather window closes in 2 hours. We wait till morning, we're stuck for 3 days. Stone had looked up from the engine he was rebuilding, a 1987 Harley Softail that belonged to a kid named Marcus who had lost his father 6 months ago and couldn't afford the repair, and he had said nothing. He had simply wiped his hands on the shop rag hanging from his belt loop and walked to his own bike. That was how Stone Mallister communicated. In movements, in presence, in the weight of a man who had said everything that needed saying in a different life, and had since decided that most words were a waste of breath better spent on staying alive. Diesel Cross, the club's sergeant-at-arms and the largest human being in Blue Ridge by a margin that made medical professionals nervous, had already been suited up. He had been suited up since 4 in the afternoon. Diesel operated on a personal principle that readiness was not a mindset but a physical state, and his physical state at any given moment resembled a fortified position. The three of them had rolled out at 6:47, headlights slicing through the first wave of snow that was already falling in curtains rather than flakes. By 7:30, the curtains had become walls. Route 9 between Blue Ridge and the county border followed the old railroad corridor for 11 miles, a straight 2-lane road flanked on the left by pine forest and on the right by the raised bed of a freight line that hadn't carried anything heavier than a weather delay in 4 years. The snow made the road and the railroad embankment the same color, the same texture, the same indistinguishable white. It was the kind of visibility that turned experienced riders into statistics. Stone rode point. He always rode point. His Harley rode king, matte black, no chrome except the pipes, no decorations except a single welded patch on the tank that read simply EMD 2011, moved through the storm at a pace that was just above dangerous and just below suicidal. The temperature reading on his handlebar gauge had stopped working at -12. He assumed that meant it had given up on him, which was a sentiment he understood. Hawk was 15 feet back on the left. Diesel, 20 feet back on the right. This was their standard formation in low visibility conditions. Triangle spacing, maximum sightlines, each man accountable for his own lane and half of the man ahead of him. 15 years of riding together had made this choreography automatic. They didn't think about it any more than they thought about breathing. What Stone thought about, when he allowed himself to think at all, was the silence. Not the storm silence. The storm was loud, was constant, was a battering physical presence that pushed against his chest like a hand trying to stop him from moving forward. He meant the silence underneath, the silence that lived in the 6 inches between his sternum and his spine, in the space where something used to be and no longer was. Emma Marie Dawson had occupied that space for 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days. She had been the size of a sparrow and the weight of an entire continent. She had smelled like baby shampoo and graham crackers, and she had called him Daddy in a voice that made the word sound like it was the most important word in any language. She had been gone for 15 years. Stone had been gone for 15 years too. He just hadn't stopped moving yet. He almost missed it. The headlight swept left as he navigated a slight bend, and for half a second, less than half a second, the duration of a blink, the duration of a heartbeat, the beam caught something that was the wrong color. Not white, not gray, not the brown-black of dead pine bark or the rusted red of old railroad iron. Purple. Stone's right hand hit the brake before his brain finished the sentence. The Road King fishtailed on black ice, corrected again, and came to a stop at a 40-degree angle to the road. Behind him, he heard Hawk's bike go wide and Diesel's engine drop to idle as both men read the emergency stop and responded the way 15 years of riding together had trained them to respond. Without questions, without panic, with immediate repositioning. Stone was off the bike before it stopped rocking. He crossed the distance to the railroad embankment in 7 strides, boots punching through the crust of snow, each step sinking to mid-shin, the cold hitting him through his jeans like a knife, because there was no such thing as adequately dressed for -20 in a full-force Montana blizzard. He hit the embankment slope on hands and knees, snow filling his gloves, and he reached the purple mitten in what felt like 3 years and 3 seconds simultaneously. He brushed the snow away. He found a hand. He found an arm. He found a child. She was curled against the base of the railroad tie. A girl, small, could not have been older than 5, wearing a purple parka that had once been adequate for weather that wasn't this and was now soaked through and rigid with ice. Her lips had the blue-gray color that Stone recognized from combat triage training and from 2 nightmares that never fully left him. Her eyes were closed. Her chest was moving, barely. The kind of barely that has an expiration time measured in single-digit minutes. Tucked inside the parka, against her chest, held in place by a small frozen fist. A piece of paper. Folded once. Already beginning to dissolve at the edges from the wet. Stone didn't read it yet. He reached for the child instead, pulled her against his chest, and turned his body to shield her from the wind. "Hawk!" His voice came out in a register he hadn't used in 15 years. Not a shout. Something older than a shout. "Hawk, get over here!" Hawk Mercer was beside him in 11 seconds. Stone knew because he counted. He counted because counting was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. Hawk took one look at the child, took one look at Stone's face, and said exactly 4 words. "What do we need?" Not a question. A transfer of command. Hawk was handing Stone everything. Every resource, every decision, every capability the Iron Guardians had between them, in 4 words, and Stone received it the same way. "She's in hypothermia. Stage 2 minimum, maybe 3. We need heat immediately, and we need a hospital within 30 minutes, or she doesn't make it." Stone was already moving, already calculating. Blue Ridge General is 16 miles. Route 9 is going to be a nightmare. Diesel. Diesel Cross appeared at the top of the embankment like a mountain that had decided to relocate. He was carrying an emergency thermal blanket from his saddlebag, the kind that crinkled like aluminum foil and looked ridiculous and had saved Stone's life once in a drainage ditch outside of Kabul, and he had it unfolded and ready before Stone finished his name. "Road's going to be ice the whole way," Diesel said. His voice was the voice of a man who dealt in facts because he had seen what happens when people deal in wishful thinking instead. "Wind's coming from the northwest, so we'll have crosswind pressure the entire run." "I know." "Stone." Diesel paused. This was notable. Diesel Cross did not pause. "You're going to be riding one-handed, in a blizzard, with a hypothermic child against your chest." "I know." Diesel looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, the way soldiers nod when they have assessed a situation and determined that the man beside them is going to do the thing regardless, and the only question is whether they'll be with him or watching from a distance. "I'll run point," Diesel said. "Clear the road. Hawk, you ride rear and watch for black ice patches." "Done," Hawk said. Stone wrapped the thermal blanket around the child, folded her against his chest with his left arm, and climbed back onto his Road King. He got the engine running with one hand and one knee, and the kind of sheer muscular stubbornness that takes 20 years of riding to develop. He could feel the child's cold radiating through his jacket into his chest, a cold so deep it felt like reaching into a freezer. He pulled his jacket around her as much as he could manage and zipped it closed over both of them. He did not look at the paper yet. He did not have time to look at the paper yet. He looked instead at Diesel's taillights pulling ahead and Hawk's headlight positioning behind him, and he followed, and he rode. He rode the way he had run patrols in places that would have killed lesser men. No emotion, no hesitation, no consideration of his own survival as a priority separate from the mission. The mission was the child breathing against his chest. The mission was the warmth his body was generating and transferring to her through the thermal blanket and the leather jacket and the simple fact of proximity. The mission was 16 miles. He had ridden in sandstorms. He had ridden in monsoon rain. He had ridden on roads that were not roads, on surfaces that were not surfaces, with men shooting at him from directions that contradicted each other. Montana in a blizzard, -20, black ice on Route 9, one functional hand. He had had worse. He told himself this. He was not entirely sure he believed it. The child made a sound at mile 4. Not a cry, not words. A small, barely audible exhalation that might have been the closest thing to a word a child could produce when every system in her body was focused entirely on the biological argument for continued existence. Stone felt it more than he heard it. A slight change in the tension of her body, a microscopic increase in the pressure of her hand against his ribs. "I've got you," he said. His voice came out rough, rougher than intended. The child did not respond. "I've got you," he said again, quieter, to himself as much as her, to the wind, to the 15 years of silence that had lived in his chest. At mile 7, Diesel's brake lights flashed, rapid, deliberate, which in the Iron Guardian's riding language meant obstacle ahead, hard stop coming. Stone read it and adjusted, and as they crested a small rise in the road, he saw what Diesel had seen. A county road maintenance truck, sideways across both lanes, stuck at a 45-degree angle with its hazard lights flashing orange into the snow. 2 maintenance workers stood beside it in high-visibility vests that were losing the battle against the blizzard. One of them had a radio. One of them had a look on his face that suggested the radio was not solving the problem. Diesel stopped, rolled down, had a 30-second conversation that Stone could not hear over the wind. Diesel came back. "Road's closed at mile 11, Diesel reported. "Accident. Semi-jackknifed across the highway. They've been trying to clear it for 2 hours. Stone looked at the maintenance workers. One of them was looking back at him, specifically at the small bundle inside Stone's jacket, at the size of the boots visible below the thermal blanket. The worker's expression changed. "There's a child?" the worker called out, voice raised against the wind. "Hypothermia," Stone called back. "We need Blue Ridge General." The worker moved faster than Stone expected a man in that weather to move. He was on the radio in 5 seconds. He talked for 45 seconds. He came back. "Old logging road, half-mile back," he said. "Takes you around the accident site. Rejoins Route 9 at mile 12. It's not maintained, but the foresters used it 2 days ago, so it hasn't drifted fully yet. 6 miles will take you longer, but it gets you through." "How much longer?" 20 minutes? Maybe 25. Stone looked down at the child against his chest, felt the quality of her breathing, made a calculation that involved multiple variables and exactly one acceptable outcome. "Lead us," Stone said to the worker. The worker blinked. "Sir, I can't leave the—" "Lead us to the turn," Stone said. "That's all I'm asking. Point us at the right road." The worker led them. The logging road was exactly as described. Narrow, dark, overshadowed by pine forest that filtered some of the wind, but created its own problems in the form of low-hanging branches and unpredictable snow releases from above. Diesel took the lead and read the road like a man born to read bad terrain, which he essentially was. Hawk rode tight behind Stone and said nothing because nothing needed to be said. At mile 3 of the logging road, in the deepest pocket of the forest where the trees closed in and the headlights created a tunnel of white and black and cold, Stone felt the child's breathing change again. It got shallower. He pressed his palm flat against her back through the layers, jacket, thermal blanket, soaked parka, and felt the rise and fall of her chest. Still there, still happening. But the rhythm was changing in a way that his combat first aid training recognized and his entire body rejected. Faster, he said. Into the wind, to no one, to everyone. Diesel heard. Diesel did not ask why. Diesel simply opened the throttle. They came out of the logging road at 12 minutes instead of 20. They hit Route 9 at mile 12, and Stone's headlight found clear road, cleared by 2 county plow trucks that had worked through from the Blue Ridge side. And he did something he had not done since 2011. He prayed with his throttle hand. He opened it all the way. Blue Ridge General Emergency Entrance came into view at 7:49 in the evening. Stone barely had the bike stopped before he was off it, one arm around the child, moving through the automatic doors at a pace that the ER intake nurse later described as the most controlled version of someone running for their life that I have ever witnessed. 5-year-old female, Stone said, his voice dropping to the flat, factual cadence of a man who had given field reports in active combat zones. Hypothermia, exposure, unknown duration. At least 2 hours in a blizzard, probably more. She was found alone on the railroad embankment on Route 9, mile marker 7. No identification, no accompanying adult. The nurse was already on her feet, already calling back into the department, already in motion. "Your relationship to the child?" she asked. Stone opened his mouth. He closed it. "I found her," he said. The nurse gave him a look that he recognized because he had received variations of it his entire adult life. The look that started at his cut, moved to the Iron Guardian's president patch, took in the size of him, and the scarring on his jaw, and the general presentation of a man who existed at the intersection of dangerous and exhausted, and made a series of rapid, mostly incorrect assumptions. "Sir, I'm going to need you to wait in the waiting area while we—" "I'm not leaving her," Stone said. Not loudly, not aggressively, simply, with the quiet certainty of a man who has decided a thing and is now merely informing the universe of that decision. Behind him, Diesel and Hawk had come through the doors. They stood flanking the entrance with the natural formation of men who spent their lives holding positions. They did not speak. They did not need to. The nurse looked at the three of them. She made a different calculation. "Wait here," she said. "I'll get the attending." Stone sat in the plastic chair closest to the treatment bay doors and did not move. He was still wearing his jacket. He was still cold through to his bones. He was still wearing his gloves, and in his right hand, inside the glove, was the piece of paper he had taken from inside the child's parka when the nurses had removed her from his arms. He had not read it yet. He read it now. The handwriting was an adult's. Female, he thought, though he could not have explained why he thought so. Something in the roundness of the letters, the deliberateness of the script. The paper was water damaged at the edges, but the center was intact. The message was 7 words. She will never be wanted by anyone. Stone read it twice. He folded it once, carefully, the way he had folded Emma's drawings 15 years ago, carefully enough that the fold would not damage anything that might someday matter. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, against his chest, in the space that had been empty for 15 years. Hawk sat down beside him, did not speak, did not need to. Outside, the blizzard continued its argument with the world. Inside, somewhere behind a set of swinging doors, a child who had been left in the snow to die was fighting to prove a piece of paper wrong. And Stone Mallister, scarred, silent, 15 years emptied out, was sitting in a plastic chair in a hospital waiting room, and for the first time since he buried a daughter in 2011, he was not ready to leave. But that was before the police arrived, and that was before Stone realized that the storm that nearly killed the girl was only the beginning, because whoever wrote that note was still out there, and they were not finished with her yet. The police arrived at 8:14 in the evening. Stone heard them before he saw them. Not sirens, the storm had swallowed those, but the specific squeak of wet boots on linoleum that moved with the kind of deliberate authority that only came from a badge and a holster, and the institutional confidence that every room you enter belongs to you by default. 2 officers. 1 detective, plainclothes, the kind of gray wool coat that said county budget and personal indifference to fashion in equal measure. The detective was mid-50s, built like a man who had been athletic once and was now carrying the memory of it around his midsection. His eyes were the color of old concrete and moved the same way, slow, heavy, taking weight measurements of everything they touched. His name, Stone would learn, was Detective Roy Callum. And Roy Callum had been doing this job for 26 years and had developed over that time a finely calibrated instinct for identifying problems before they fully materialized. The 3 Iron Guardians sitting in the ER waiting area registered immediately as a problem. Callum stopped 6 feet from Stone's chair, positioned himself with the practiced geometry of a man who always kept his exit visible and his gun hand clear, and looked at Stone the way customs agents look at passports, searching for the thing that doesn't quite fit. "You the one who brought the girl in?" Callum said. "Yes." "Stone Mallister, president of the Iron Guardians." Callum said it the way you say a name you already looked up. "You want to tell me what a motorcycle club president was doing on Route 9 in a blizzard tonight?" Stone looked up at him. His face did the thing it always did under institutional scrutiny, went completely, disconcertingly still. Not aggressive, not defensive. The stillness of a man who had been questioned by people with considerably more leverage than a county detective and had outlasted all of them. "Annual chapter run," Stone said. "We do it every winter." "In a blizzard." "We ride in weather." Callum tilted his head a fraction of a degree. "How'd you find her?" "Headlight caught her mitten. I stopped." "You were riding on the railroad embankment?" "The embankment is adjacent to the road. You can check the mileage on my bike if you want to know how far off Route 9 I was." Callum looked at him for a long moment. Stone did not look away. This was not defiance. This was economy. Stone did not spend energy on gestures that cost him and bought him nothing. "The child have any ID on her?" Callum asked. "No." "Any indication of where she came from? Who she belongs to?" Stone thought of the folded paper against his chest. The 7 words. The careful, deliberate handwriting. "No," he said. It was not a lie, he told himself. Not technically. The paper said nothing about where she came from. It said only what someone had decided she was worth. Callum studied him another moment with those concrete eyes, then pulled out a small notebook. Actual paper, actual pen, the affectation of a man who mistrusted digital tools with the same energy he mistrusted motorcycle club presidents, and began to write. "We're going to need a full statement," Callum said, "from all 3 of you, separately." Hawk, from his chair 2 seats down, said nothing. Diesel, standing near the door because the chairs were not engineered for a man of his dimensions, said nothing. They both radiated the specific quality of stillness that former military men radiate in rooms with law enforcement, cooperative on the surface, impenetrable at the depth, a stone wall painted to look like a window. "Fine," Stone said. "You should also know," Callum added in the tone of a man delivering information he knows will land hard and wants to watch land, "that the moment we identify the child, this becomes a child endangerment investigation, and everyone connected to her discovery becomes part of that investigation." "I understand," Stone said. "Do you?" Callum held his gaze. "Because from where I'm standing, what I've got is an unidentified minor, severe hypothermia, signs of what the intake nurse is already describing as possible prior physical trauma, found alone in a blizzard on a railroad embankment, and the only person who can tell me how she got there is the president of an outlaw motorcycle club." The word outlaw landed in the room the way Callum intended it to land. Heavy, pointed, designed to provoke. Stone received it the way he received most things designed to provoke him, which was to say he set it aside in the internal filing system he had developed over decades of being the kind of man that institutions found inconvenient, and he looked at Callum with the same untroubled stillness he had maintained since the detective walked in. "Are you asking me something specific?" Stone said, "or are you just establishing the atmosphere?" Callum almost smiled. It was the kind of almost smile that didn't indicate warmth. "Mr. Mallister," he said, "how well do you know Blue Ridge's child welfare protocols?" "Well enough to know they're underfunded and overworked," Stone said. "Then you know that when we have an unidentified minor with evidence of prior trauma, she goes into emergency protective custody. Tonight." Stone said nothing. "That means a foster placement," Callum continued. "Tonight. She doesn't go home with you. She doesn't go anywhere with your club. She goes into the system." Hawk shifted in his chair. A small movement. The kind of movement that in the body language of a man who had served 3 tours in places that didn't appear on news reports meant I have a problem with this situation and I am currently deciding whether to voice it. Stone put a hand on Hawk's forearm without looking at him. A single touch. Not yet. "I'm not trying to take her anywhere," Stone said to Callum. "I'm trying to make sure she lives through the night." Callum's concrete eyes held for another beat. Then he wrote something in his notebook and stepped back to consult with the uniformed officers, and Stone turned and looked at the treatment bay doors and listened to the specific silence of a building where someone is fighting for survival behind doors that don't open from the outside. It was Hawk who spoke first, voice low, angled so only Stone could hear. "They're going to come after us for this," Hawk said. "You know that." "I know." "Callum's already running our records. He's going to find the Hollister incident, the dockyard thing, everything from the Bozeman chapter that got traced back to us even though we weren't." "Hawk." "I'm just laying it out." "I know what our record looks like," Stone said. "I know what it looks like to people who only look at records." Hawk was quiet for a moment. The hospital fluorescents hummed above them with the specific frequency of institutional indifference. Outside the ER windows, the blizzard was still making its case against the world. "What was on the paper?" Hawk asked. Stone turned and looked at him. Hawk met his eyes without flinching. "I saw you read it, in the waiting room, before Callum got here. What did it say?" A long silence. "She will never be wanted by anyone," Stone said. Hawk's jaw tightened. It was a small movement, but on Hawk Mercer's face, which was not a face that gave things away for free, it was the equivalent of another man putting his fist through a wall. "Who writes that?" Hawk said. Not a question. "Someone who needed her to disappear," Stone said. They sat with that for a moment. Then the treatment bay doors swung open and a doctor came through. Late 30s, Filipino, the kind of controlled exhaustion on her face that came from years of emergency medicine making its deposits. And she stopped in front of Stone because he was the one who had been watching those doors since the moment they closed. "Dr. Santos," she said, extending a hand. Stone shook it. "I understand you're the one who found her." "Yes." "She's stable," Dr. Santos said. "Core temperature is coming back up. She's hypothermic, stage 2, but she didn't get to stage 3. You got her here in time." A pause. The specific kind of pause that precedes a harder sentence. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand I'm asking because it matters for her treatment, not because I'm accusing anyone of anything." "Ask," Stone said. "The bruising on her ribs and upper arms is not consistent with tonight's exposure event. It's older. Multiple stages of healing, which means multiple incidents over an extended period." Dr. Santos held his gaze steadily. "This child has been physically abused, repeatedly, before tonight." The fluorescents hummed. Outside, the wind hit the ER windows with a sound like a hand pressing flat against glass. "Is she conscious?" Stone asked. "Intermittently. She's frightened. She won't let the nurses touch her without putting up a fight, which is actually a good sign physiologically. She's got enough energy to be frightened. But it's making the IV placement difficult." Stone stood up. Dr. Santos looked at him. "Mr. Mallister," Stone said, "and I'm not going in there to interfere with your treatment. I'm going in there because she's frightened and she knows my voice." A long beat. "She knows your voice," Dr. Santos repeated, testing the logic of this against what she knew about the situation. "She heard it for 45 minutes on the back of my bike," Stone said. "It's the most familiar thing she has right now." Dr. Santos looked at him for a moment longer with the kind of assessment that a good emergency physician develops. Reading not just what people say, but the structure underneath it, the load-bearing walls of a person's intentions. Then she stepped aside. The treatment bay was small, aggressively lit, and smelled of antiseptic and the particular sweetness of warming blankets fresh from the blanket warmer. The child, Lily, though Stone did not know her name yet, lay on the gurney surrounded by monitoring equipment and two nurses who were attempting to maintain professional detachment while managing a 5-year-old who kept pulling at the warming blanket with what little strength she had left. Stone came through the door and stopped. He stopped because the child's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in the tight, total way of a child bracing for something bad, opened when she heard his boots on the floor. They were dark eyes, a deep, particular brown that was almost black in the treatment bay lighting. And they were the eyes of a child who had learned very early that the world required constant threat assessment, and who was conducting that assessment right now, rapidly, with the exhausting efficiency of someone who had been doing it since before she could name the feeling. She looked at him. She did not look away. "Hey," Stone said. He pulled the chair from the corner of the bay and set it beside the gurney and sat down, because he was not going to stand over her, because he knew instinctively what it meant to be the size he was in a small room with someone who had been hurt. She watched him. "You're safe here," he said. He said it the way he had said "I've got you on the back of the bike," not as a comfort word, not as a platitude, but as a field report. An assessment of current conditions. This is the situation as it stands. She watched him for another long moment. Then, with enormous effort, she uncurled the fist that had been gripping the warming blanket and moved her hand approximately 3 inches across the gurney surface in his direction. Stone put his hand on the gurney beside hers, not touching, just present. The nurse with the IV kit looked at him. He gave her the smallest possible nod. The nurse moved in with the practiced, careful speed of someone who understood that windows close fast, and got the line placed before the child could fully process what was happening, and the child made a sound, high, frightened, involuntary, and grabbed for Stone's hand with both of hers. He let her hold it. He did not say anything. He did not try to explain the IV or the monitoring equipment, or the warming blanket, or the fluorescent lights. He simply let her hold his hand, which was twice the size of her head, and probably the most ridiculous thing he had ever been aware of about himself. And he waited. After 4 minutes and 20 seconds, the child fell asleep. Stone sat with her for another 15 minutes, until Dr. Santos appeared in the doorway and gave him the slight tilt of the head that meant she's stable. "You can come out now." And he stood carefully, extricated his hand from the child's grip with a patience and delicacy that would have surprised every person who had ever made assumptions about him based on his size and his cut, and walked back out to the waiting area, where Detective Callum was waiting with a woman Stone did not recognize. She was mid-40s, the specific bureaucratic exhaustion of county social services worn into every line of her face, like something that had been carved rather than accumulated. She had a badge on a lanyard, a file folder, and the expression of someone who had been called in from home on a blizzard night and was dealing with that fact the only way professional training allowed, by converting every personal feeling into procedural language. "Mr. Mallister," Callum said. "This is Linda Ferris, Child Protective Services. She's the emergency placement coordinator for Blue Ridge County." Stone looked at Linda Ferris. Linda Ferris looked at him with the particular caution of a woman who had learned over many years that the men who most insisted they meant no harm were sometimes the most dangerous, and who had also learned, more painfully, that the men the system immediately distrusted sometimes turned out to be the only reliable thing in a child's life. She was holding both of those learnings simultaneously, which gave her face a quality of carefully maintained neutrality. "The child will need to be placed tonight," she said. "We have an emergency foster family in Blue Ridge who can—" "She doesn't know anyone in Blue Ridge," Stone said. "She doesn't know anyone anywhere, Mr. Mallister. She's unidentified. We don't—" "She knows me," Stone said. Linda Ferris opened her file folder. "Your background, Mr. Mallister." She looked at him over the folder with the careful, non-accusatory tone of someone delivering information they expect to be challenged on. "You have priors. 15 years ago, assault. The charges were reduced to disorderly conduct. I have documentation. You're the president of a motorcycle club with an ongoing DEA file. An ongoing inquiry. Uninvestigated. No charges, no convictions, no evidence of club-sanctioned criminal activity." Stone paused. And if the DEA had anything substantial, we wouldn't be standing in an ER. We'd be standing in a federal building. Linda Ferris said nothing. I'm not asking for permanent placement, Stone said. I'm not asking for anything permanent tonight. I'm asking for temporary emergency guardianship for a child who is frightened and who responds to my presence and who, according to your emergency foster families file, I'm willing to bet is two underpaid and overextended people who have never met a terrified 5-year-old before tonight. Callum said, Mr. Mallister. How many emergency foster placements in this county? Stone asked. Not to Callum, to Ferris. Ferris did not answer immediately, which was itself an answer. How many are currently occupied? Stone said. A pause. Mr. Mallister, Ferris said, the system exists to protect children from... I know what the system exists to do, Stone said. I also know what it actually does. I've watched it, for years, in this county. I've watched it move children from dangerous homes into other homes and call it protection, and move them again 6 months later and call that protection too. His voice stayed level. The anger underneath it was old and cold and too compressed to have a temperature anymore. I am not the system. I am a specific person with a specific set of skills who found a specific child and carried her on my chest for 16 miles in a blizzard because there was nobody else. The fluorescents hummed. Linda Ferris looked at her file folder. She looked at Stone. She made the calculation that her 22 years of casework had trained her to make not the easy calculation, not the default calculation, but the one that required her to look at the actual variables in front of her and weight them against each other with the honesty that the job required, even when the job tried to replace honesty with procedure. I can't authorize guardianship tonight, she said. That requires a hearing. But I can note in my report that you cooperated fully, that the child shows a positive response to your presence, and that further assessment of your suitability as a placement option should be conducted. She paused. That's the most I can do tonight. That's enough, Stone said. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough. But it was a door, and Stone Mallister had spent his entire adult life identifying doors that were open half an inch and getting through them. Hawk appeared at Stone's shoulder. He had 2 coffees from the vending machine, the kind that came in a paper cup and tasted like burned ambition, and he held one out to Stone without making eye contact with Callum or Ferris. Stone took it. The coffee was too hot and too bad, and exactly what he needed. What's happening? Hawk said quietly. Not to Callum, to Stone. They're placing her tonight, Stone said. Temporarily. Hawk drank his coffee. And us? We're going to the station to give statements, Stone said. And then we're going to come back here and sit in this waiting room until she wakes up. And we know she's all right. Hawk nodded once. And then? Hawk said. And then, Stone said, we're going to find out who wrote that note. Hawk turned and looked at him. A long look. The look of a man who has known another man long enough to read the text underneath the surface and understand that what was just said was not the same as what was just meant. What was just meant was something older and quieter and considerably more dangerous. Stone, Hawk said, low, careful. I know, Stone said. The last time you went looking for something that hurt someone you cared about. I know, Stone said again. The same 2 words. But different weight. Hawk held his gaze for another beat, then drank his coffee and said nothing more. Because he knew, as Diesel knew, as every man who had ridden with Stone Mallister for 15 years knew, that there were things Stone kept below the surface, not because he was hiding them, but because the surface couldn't hold them, and the child in that treatment bay had already broken through to a depth in Stone that none of them had been able to reach in a decade and a half of trying. They gave their statements. They came back. They sat in the plastic chairs until the night became a different color outside the windows, and the blizzard began, incrementally, to run out of argument. It was Diesel who fell asleep first, sitting upright with his arms crossed, a man-shaped structure that the night couldn't move. Hawk leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, but didn't sleep. Stone knew the difference, had known it for 15 years, knew Hawk's sleeping face and his thinking face, and they did not look alike. Stone did not sleep at all. At 4:17 in the morning, Dr. Santos came back out. "She's awake," Santos said. "She's asking for something. We can't understand what she's saying. She said she's mostly not speaking, but she's making a sound that seems like a name or a word." Santos paused. "It might be your name. We can't tell. The inflection is right for a name." Stone was on his feet before Santos finished the sentence. The child was sitting up in the gurney when he came through the door, the warming blankets pulled up to her chin, the monitoring equipment beeping its steady reassurance. She was looking at the door when it opened. She had been looking at the door. When she saw him, something in her face changed. Not relief, exactly. Relief was too simple a word for what happened on the face of a child who had learned that trust was a trap. It was something more careful than relief. Something that was testing the hypothesis of safety for the very first time and finding the preliminary results more positive than expected. Stone sat down in the chair. They looked at each other. "Hey," he said. She looked at him for a long time. "Stone," she said. The sound was barely a word, more breath than voice. She must have heard one of the nurses or Santos use his name sometime in the night, must have held on to it with the part of her that was still fighting, the part that had decided, against every piece of evidence her short life had provided, that this particular person was worth the risk of a word. Stone's hand, resting on the edge of the gurney, was completely still. "Yeah," he said. His voice did something he hadn't given it permission to do. "That's right." She looked at him for another moment. Then she reached out and put her small hand on top of his, the way she had done in the night. "Don't go," she whispered. Stone covered her hand with his, carefully, the way you cover something that might break. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. He meant it. He had no idea yet what it was going to cost him to keep it. Because that morning, while Stone sat in that treatment bay holding a child's hand and making a promise he had no legal right to make, someone in Blue Ridge was making a different kind of plan. Someone who had already decided that the child was a loose end. Someone who had not expected her to be found. Someone who had written 7 words on a piece of paper and left her in the snow with the kind of calculation that only works if nobody comes looking. Somebody was already coming looking, not to save her. And at 8:43 in the morning, when Linda Ferris walked back into Blue Ridge General with a court order, 2 more social workers, and the specific expression of a woman who had received a phone call from a lawyer at 7 a.m. A lawyer retained by a woman named Vera Blackwood, who was identifying herself as Lily's aunt and legal next of kin, who was demanding her niece's immediate return to family care, and who had filed a parallel report with the county sheriff's office, alleging that an outlaw motorcycle club had abducted a minor from a highway and was refusing to release her to authorities. Stone Mallister understood, with the cold clarity of a man who had been ambushed before and knew the feeling in his body before his brain finished processing it, that the war for this child had not begun in the blizzard. It had begun long before the snow, and whoever had started it had been planning it long enough to know exactly which weapons to use. Stone read the last message he'd sent Hawk, and then sat with his phone face down on his thigh for a long time. She knew where the child was. She left her on that embankment. She drove away. And then she sat somewhere and waited. The waiting room had emptied in the last hour. 1 elderly man with a bandaged hand, a young woman asleep across 3 chairs with her coat pulled over her face, the night shift intake nurse clicking through something on her computer with the measured patience of someone managing 8 hours on institutional fluorescence. Outside the windows, Blue Ridge was doing what small Montana towns do after blizzards, going very quiet, very white, very still, as if the world had pressed pause on everything except the cold. Stone did not feel still. He felt the way the air feels before lightning, dense, pressurized, the specific quality of atmosphere that precedes something that cannot be undone. He stood up. He went to the men's room off the main corridor and stood at the sink and ran cold water over his hands and looked at his own face in the mirror above it. He did this sometimes, when the internal noise got loud enough that external input became necessary. Just looked at himself, at the scar along his jaw that he'd stopped noticing years ago and only remembered when other people noticed it for him, at the specific depth behind his eyes, that people sometimes described as intensity, and he described as nothing because it was in fact the place where things went when they had nowhere else to go. He had been putting things there since 2011. The basin was getting full. He thought about Lily saying his name. Stone. Barely a word, more breath than voice. But her. Entirely her. He turned off the water and dried his hands and went back out. Hawk was coming through the main entrance when Stone reached the waiting room. Snow on his shoulders, his face carrying the specific combination of cold and controlled urgency that Stone had learned over 15 years to read as "I have something and you need to hear it now." Diesel materialized from the corridor. He had been in the parking lot, Stone knew, because Diesel did not sleep in hospitals, did not sleep in any enclosed space that had only one exit, a habit from places and years that were not discussed but never fully left. And the three of them converged in the far corner of the waiting room with the natural gravitational pull of men who had done this so many times, the choreography was unconscious. Hawk sat down, leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice low and direct. I pulled Daniel Dawson's conviction record, full trial transcript, 18 months ago, Blue Ridge County Courthouse, Judge Harold Pratt presiding. He paused. The key witness against Daniel Dawson at trial. The person whose testimony established that he personally authorized the transfers was the Dawson family accountant, a man named Carl Whitby. All right, Stone said. Carl Whitby has been Vera Blackwood's personal accountant for 9 years, Hawk said. The fluorescence hummed. Stone looked at Hawk without speaking because sometimes the right response to information of that weight was to let it sit in the room long enough to make sure it was real. She used her own accountant, Diesel said, testified against her nephew through his own family's financial records. Not nephew, Stone said. He was already reconstructing the architecture. Lily's father, Daniel Dawson. Vera is his sister. Half-sister, Hawk corrected. Different mothers. Vera is 8 years older. She was named executor of the Dawson estate when their father died 3 years ago. Daniel was supposed to inherit the primary assets when the estate closed. Mineral rights, industrial land, 2 investment accounts. Hawk's voice stayed level, but underneath it was the controlled tone of a man delivering information he finds personally repugnant. Vera contested the terms, said Daniel was financially irresponsible. The court-mandated review was 6 months long. During that 6 months, Daniel was arrested, tried, and convicted of embezzling from the very estate that was under review. Timing, Stone said. Perfect timing, Hawk said. A convicted embezzler cannot inherit. Under the estate's terms, if the primary heir is legally disqualified, the assets pass to the named alternate beneficiary. He looked at Stone. Vera Blackwood. And Lily, Stone said. Lily held a separate trust established by her grandfather directly. 20% of the mineral rights, untouchable until her 6th birthday, at which point the trust activates and requires a legal guardian to administer it on her behalf until she turns 18. Hawk let that land. She turned 6 in 22 days. Stone sat with that number. 22 days. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about a photograph taken through a hospital window in a blizzard. He thought about a woman who had walked into this building at 9 in the morning with a lawyer and documentation already assembled. He thought about 7 words written on a piece of paper. She wasn't trying to abandon her, Stone said slowly. The construction was happening in real time, piece by piece, the way field intelligence assembled into operational picture. Not clean, not elegant, just true. She was trying to eliminate her, before the birthday, before the trust activated, before Lily could have a legal guardian appointed who wasn't Vera. He stopped. If Lily dies before she turns 6, what happens to the trust? Hawk looked at him. It reverts to the estate, which Vera controls. Yes. The word settled in the room like a stone dropped in water. Diesel, who had been standing with his arms crossed and his weight balanced on both feet, in the stance of a man who was listening and simultaneously maintaining awareness of everything within a 40-foot radius, said, "She drove a 5-year-old child to a railroad embankment in a blizzard and left her there and wrote a note to make sure anyone who found her would believe she was unwanted and not look too hard for her family." Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. And then, Diesel continued,
When the child survived, when we found her, Vera pivoted, became the grieving aunt, established herself as next of kin, tried to get custody. His voice was very flat, very careful. The voice of a man applying enormous compression to something that would otherwise be considerably louder. And if she gets that custody, Lily doesn't make it to 6, Stone said. The waiting room breathed its fluorescent breath around them. Stone's hand was on his phone. He called Thorne. She answered on the second ring with the voice of a woman who had not been asleep. I know, she said before he could speak. Hawk called me 20 minutes ago with the accountant connection. I'm already pulling the trial transcript. Carl Whitby's testimony has 3 places where the dates don't align with the financial records as filed. I flagged them when I read through the first time, but I thought it was sloppy bookkeeping. It's not sloppy bookkeeping. A pause, the specific pause of a lawyer assembling argument in real time. It's fabricated bookkeeping, and if I can get a forensic accountant to confirm that in the next 14 days, 22 days, Stone said. Lily's birthday is in 22 days. A longer pause. Then we need to move faster than 14 days, Thorne said. Yes, Stone said. I need you to stay clean, Stone. First name basis now. The situation had apparently crossed the threshold where professional distance became inefficient. Everything I'm building depends on you being the opposite of what Vera is telling the court you are. Her entire counterargument rests on you being dangerous. You need to be so not dangerous that it embarrasses her. I understand, Stone said. I mean it, Thorne said. If Vera Blackwood trips over a crack in the sidewalk in the next 22 days, I need you to have been somewhere with 8 witnesses. Stone said nothing. Stone. I heard you, he said. He hung up. He looked at Hawk. He looked at Diesel. We do this clean, he said. Hawk said, define clean. Legal, documented, through Thorne. Stone's jaw was tight, the scar along it pulling slightly the way it did when his body was running hotter than his face showed. Every step, everything we find goes through her. Nothing we do gives Vera's lawyer ammunition. Diesel said, and if the court doesn't move fast enough? Then we find another way that's still legal, Stone said. Diesel looked at him with the flat assessment of a man who had known Stone Mallister for a long time and understood the distance between what Stone said and what Stone would do if the situation reached a specific kind of extreme. He did not comment on that distance. He simply nodded once. All right, he said. The next 4 days were a different kind of war. The Iron Guardians converted their operation entirely to the task. Not with weapons, not with the confrontational energy that their cuts and their bikes and their size naturally projected into any room they entered, but with the painstaking, unglamorous, brutally boring work of building a legal case from the ground up. Hawk ran record searches from the clubhouse, cross-referencing financial filings with court documents with Carl Whitby's professional history. 2 other club members, Reno, who had an accounting background from a previous life nobody asked about, and a member they called Specs, who had done 3 years of pre-law before a family situation redirected his trajectory, joined the effort. Diesel drove to Missoula and sat in Margaret Thorne's office for 6 hours and emerged with a 17-page document outlining the structural inconsistencies in the Dawson estate transfer. Stone visited Lily every morning. This was the part that Detective Callum watched most closely. Stone knew he was being watched. Callum had made it sufficiently clear through 3 additional visits to the hospital and 2 phone calls to Thorne that the sheriff's office considered Stone's continued presence at Blue Ridge General to be, at minimum, worth monitoring. Stone did not alter his behavior in response to this monitoring. He arrived at 9. He sat with Lily. He brought things: a coloring book, a small stuffed dog that Diesel had sourced from somewhere with characteristic bluntness and characteristic accuracy, a cup of cocoa from the good place on 5th Street because the hospital's version tasted like hot brown nothing. Lily was talking more, in increments, small sentences, partial sentences, sometimes just a word or a sound that carried more meaning than a paragraph. She told Stone her dog's name was Biscuit, which she announced with the gravity of someone revealing important intelligence. She told him she didn't like the overhead lights in her room, that she preferred the lamp in the corner. She told him, on the 4th morning, with her eyes on the stuffed dog and not on him, that the place she had lived before was cold. Stone said, "Cold like the snow?" She shook her head, a small, tight movement.
cold like inside. He didn't push, he didn't ask anything else. He just moved the lamp from the corner so it was closer to the bed, and he sat in his chair, and he let her set the pace of everything. On the 5th day, Lily said, "Is the bad lady coming back?" Stone was very still. "What bad lady?" he said, carefully. The tone of someone who knows the answer and needs it said by the right person. Lily picked at the edge of her blanket with 2 fingers, a small, anxious movement that Dr. Keene had told him was a self-regulation behavior, the kind of thing a child's nervous system develops when it has been required to manage too much for too long. "The one who said I was bad," Lily said, "and put me in the cold." Stone's hand was on the edge of the gurney. He moved it 1 inch closer to hers. "No," he said, and then, because he would not lie to her, and he would not make a promise he wasn't certain he could keep, "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure she doesn't come near you." Lily looked at him for a long time. "Is that the same as no?" she asked. Stone thought about that. A 5-year-old asking that question with that particular precision meant she had been given enough convenient reassurances in her short life to have developed a healthy suspicion of them. "It's stronger than no," he said. "No is just a word. What I said is a plan." Something in Lily's face shifted, fractional, the way trust shifts when it moves from theoretical to structural. She nodded. Then she held her stuffed dog out to him. "Can you hold Biscuit for a minute? My arm is tired." Stone took the stuffed dog with both hands and held it with the solemnity it was offered. It was the most important thing he was holding, and he knew it. The break in the case came on the 6th day, and it came from an entirely unexpected direction. It came from Linda Ferris. She called Thorne at 2 in the afternoon, and Thorne called Stone 4 minutes later, and her voice had a quality he had not heard in it before. The quality of controlled acceleration, the voice of a person who had been running hard and just hit a downhill slope. "Linda Ferris has been doing her own investigation," Thorne said. Quietly. She didn't tell anyone because she wasn't sure she had enough, and she didn't want to get ahead of herself. But she called me because she decided she had enough. "What does she have?" Stone said. "She ran a welfare history on Lily Dawson, standard procedure. What she found is that there have been 4 separate welfare checks on Lily's address in the past 18 months, 4 calls to the county line reporting concerns, all 4 were investigated, all 4 were closed." "Closed how?" "Closed by the same caseworker, a man named Tom Briggs, assigned to the Blackwood case as primary contact for all 4 incidents." Stone felt the shape of it before Thorne said the next part. "Tom Briggs," Thorne said, "is the brother-in-law of Daniel Hess, Vera Blackwood's lawyer." The garage behind the Iron Guardians clubhouse was the place where the Brotherhood went when they needed walls around a conversation. Not the main room. The main room was for the business of the club, for the ceremonial weight of decisions made in front of the full chapter. The garage was for the private weight, the kind of conversation that required engine smell and concrete floor and the specific acoustics of a space that held years of machinery and honesty. Stone called church that evening. Not a formal meeting, not a vote, just the core 4. Stone, Hawk, Diesel, and now Reno, because Reno had been carrying the financial thread for 4 days and had earned his place at the table. They stood around the workbench in the garage with the overhead lights on, and the side door cracked 2 inches so the diesel cold came in and kept everyone honest, and Stone laid it all out. The accountant, the caseworker, the lawyer. The 4 welfare checks closed by the same connected man. The trust. The birthday. The photograph taken before Vera arrived. He laid it all out and let it sit. Reno said, "It's a network." "It's a network," Stone confirmed. "She didn't just plan this," Hawk said. He was standing with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. When Hawk looked at the floor in conversation, it meant he was working through something he didn't want to show on his face until it was finished. "She built infrastructure, long term. She's been building this for at least 2 years, Stone said. Probably longer. You don't cultivate a county caseworker in 3 months. "How many people are we talking?" Reno said. "Confirmed?" 3. "Whitby, Briggs, Hess." Stone paused. "Unconfirmed?" "I don't know. And that's the problem." Diesel had not spoken yet. When Diesel had not spoken for an extended period in a serious conversation, it meant he was holding something. Everyone in the room knew this. Stone looked at him directly. Diesel. Diesel unfolded his arms. He reached into the inside pocket of his cut and produced a photograph. Actual paper, printed, which meant he had gone to the effort of printing it, which meant he considered it important enough to make physical. He set it on the workbench. Stone looked at it. It was a photograph of two people at what appeared to be a restaurant, the kind of upscale establishment that had tablecloths and ambient lighting, and the kind of architecture that said money with the quiet confidence of something that didn't need to say it loudly. One of the people was Vera Blackwood. The other was a man Stone did not immediately recognize. 50s, dark suit, the kind of face that had been attractive once and had since migrated into something harder. Who is that? Stone said. His name is Marcus Cole, Diesel said. He operates a private estate management and asset transfer firm based in Calgary, specializes in cross-border asset liquidation. His firm has been under investigation by the Canadian Securities Commission twice in the last decade. Both investigations closed without charges. Diesel paused. Stone. He has a buyer lined up for the mineral rights, the entire package, a mining consortium in Vancouver. The deal is contingent on clear title. Clear title requires the trust to be dissolved or transferred, Stone said, or the beneficiary to be... Yes, Stone said. He didn't let Diesel finish the sentence. He didn't need to hear it finished. When was this photograph taken? 3 weeks ago, Diesel said. 4 days before the blizzard. The garage held that information in its concrete and Diesel smells silence. 4 days before the blizzard. 4 days before a 5-year-old girl was left on a railroad embankment with a note that said she would never be wanted by anyone. 4 days after Vera Blackwood sat across a tablecloth from a man who had a buyer ready and a deal waiting on clear title. Stone looked at the photograph for a long time. He thought about Margaret Thorne telling him to stay clean. He thought about Lily asking if the bad lady was coming back and the difference between no and a plan. He thought about Emma Marie, who had been 4 years old and had called him Daddy in a voice that made the word sound like the most important word in any language. And he thought about what it meant to lose a child to something preventable, and how that loss did not end, only changed shape, and had been changing shape for 15 years, looking for somewhere to put itself. He picked up the photograph. Thorne gets this tonight, he said. And if Thorne can't move fast enough, Reno said. Stone set the photograph down again. He looked at the 4 men around the workbench. Hawk, with his ranger stillness, Diesel, with his mountain permanence, Reno, with the sharp, careful intelligence of a man who had learned to survive by being smarter than the room, his brothers, the people who had shown up in his life after everything else stopped showing up and had stayed without being asked to stay. Then we find out what we're actually made of, Stone said. The call came at 11:47 that night. Stone was in the clubhouse, at the table, in the main room, the photograph and the 17-page Thorne document and Hawk's printed records spread in front of him like a map of a territory he was still learning. The room was lit by the single overhead bulb and the neon beer sign in the window that had been broken since 2019 and nobody had fixed because the broken flicker of it had become somehow characteristic. The coffee on the table was cold. His third of the night. The number on his phone was a Montana State prison line. He answered, "Is this Stone Mallister?" The voice was male, young, raw in the way of someone running on almost nothing. "Yes," Stone said. "My name is Daniel Dawson," the voice said. "I've been trying to reach anyone connected to my daughter for 6 days. They told me, one of the guards told me, that there was a man named Mallister who had been with her at the hospital." A pause. The pause of a man holding himself together with both hands. "Is she alive?" Stone closed his eyes. He opened them. "She's alive," he said. "She's stable. She's been asking for you." He stopped. Then, because it was true, and because this man deserved the truth. "She hasn't said that specifically. She's 5. She doesn't have the words for it yet, but she's been reaching for something I can see she doesn't have, and I think that something is her father." A long silence on the line.
The kind of silence that a person makes when they have been holding a specific fear for so long that the relief of its absence takes more space than they expected. "I didn't embezzle anything," Daniel Dawson said. His voice had steadied by 1 degree. "I know that's what the record says. I know how it looks.
But I've been in here for 14 months, and I've been telling everyone who would listen that the records were fabricated and nobody—" His voice cracked. 1 fracture. He compressed it. "Nobody listened." "I'm listening," Stone said. Another silence. "She's the only thing I—" Daniel stopped, started again. "My daughter, Lily, she was with Vera. That was the deal. Vera agreed to take care of her while I was in here because I had nobody else. My ex-wife is gone. I had nobody else. And Vera—" He stopped again. "I trusted her. She's my sister, half-sister. I trusted her." Stone looked at the photograph of Vera Blackwood and Marcus Cole at their restaurant table with the ambient lighting and the tablecloths and the mining deal waiting to close. "Mr. Dawson," Stone said, "I have a lawyer named Margaret Thorne. She's going to contact you through the prison legal services tomorrow morning. I need you to tell her everything you just told me and everything else you know in as much detail as you can give her." A pause. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Daniel Dawson said. "Yes. Anything." "All right," Stone said. "Your daughter is safe. She's being cared for. She's not going back to Vera Blackwood. I'm going to make sure of that." He stopped himself, thought of Lily asking the difference between no and a plan. That's a plan, not a promise, but it's a solid plan. Daniel Dawson was quiet for a moment. "Why are you doing this?" he said. "You don't know us. You don't know her." Stone thought about a purple mitten in the snow. He thought about 15 years of a certain kind of silence. "I found her," he said. "That's enough." He hung up. He sat with the cold coffee and the documents and the broken neon flicker for a long time. At 12:31 a.m., "Bem—"
His phone lit up with the message from Thorne. She had been served with an emergency court order. Vera Blackwood's lawyer had filed with a judge, Judge Harold Pratt, the same judge who had overseen Daniel Dawson's conviction, requesting emergency dissolution of Stone's informal contact arrangement with Lily, citing psychological distress to the minor caused by ongoing exposure to an individual under criminal investigation. There was no criminal investigation. Thorne had written that in capitals. There is no criminal investigation. But the filing cited one, and Judge Pratt had signed the order at midnight, and it was effective at 7 a.m. At 7 a.m., Stone Mallister would be legally barred from entering Blue Ridge General. He had 6 hours and 19 minutes. He stared at the order on his phone screen. He thought of Lily, who had learned to reach for him, who had named her dog Biscuit and asked him to hold it when her arm was tired, who had asked if the bad lady was coming back and had listened to his answer with the specific attention of a child weighing the difference between words and intention. He thought of Judge Harold Pratt, who had convicted Daniel Dawson on Carl Whitby's fabricated testimony. He thought of Vera Blackwood building her network over years, patient, careful, thorough. He thought of the photograph of a child's purple mitten against 30 inches of snow, and the way that image had struck something in him so deep that 15 years of carefully maintained distance collapsed in the span of a heartbeat. He thought of Margaret Thorne saying, "Everything I'm building depends on you being the opposite of what Vera is telling the court you are." He picked up his phone. He called Thorne. She answered immediately. "I know," she said. "Pratt is dirty," Stone said. "Probably," Thorne said. "Possibly. I can't prove it tonight." "What can you prove tonight?" A pause. "I can file an emergency appeal to a different judge first thing in the morning challenging the order on procedural grounds. The filing contains a misrepresentation of fact. The criminal investigation claim is false, and I have documentation proving it. I can get a hearing by 10 a.m. if I get the right judge." "And if you don't get the right judge?" Thorne was quiet. "Stone," she said, "you need to listen to me very carefully right now." "I'm listening." "Whatever you're thinking about doing in the next 6 hours, don't." Stone said nothing. "If you violate that order," Thorne said, "if you go near that hospital before the appeal hearing, Vera wins. Not eventually. Immediately.
The court will remove Lily to foster care under emergency circumstances. Vera will move for expedited guardianship on the grounds that the situation has become unsafe, and I will not be able to stop it. The broken neon flickered. She's going to be alone in there, Stone said. When she wakes up in the morning and I don't come. I know, Thorne said. She's 5 years old and she's been hurt by every adult she's known, and she's just starting to believe that someone will stay. I know, Thorne said. Her voice had something in it that was not professional and not distant and was simply human. Stone. I know, but the only way to stay with her is to let me do this the right way. You walk through those doors before the appeal clears and you lose her, permanently. The longest silence of the night. Stone sat in the clubhouse with the cold coffee and the broken neon, and his brotherhood's documents spread across the table like a map of everything that stood between a child and the woman who had tried to erase her. And he made the hardest decision of his life. Not the most dangerous decision, not the most painful decision, but the hardest one, because it required him to do the thing that went against every instinct he had been built from the ground up to follow. He stayed where he was. He sat in that chair until dawn came through the clubhouse windows in the thin, uncertain way of Montana winter dawns, colorless and cold and offering nothing except the continuation of time. And at 6:52 in the morning, 13 minutes before the order took effect, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Mr. Mallister. The voice was female, older, carrying the particular quality of someone accustomed to delivering information that changes things. My name is Judge Catherine Wald. I am the presiding family court judge for the 4th District. I have in front of me an emergency appeal filed by Margaret Thorne at 5:48 this morning, along with 17 pages of supporting documentation and a transcript excerpt from Daniel Dawson that Prison Legal Services transmitted at 5:30 a.m. A pause. I have some questions for you. Stone straightened in his chair. Ask, he said. The documentation your attorney has provided suggests a coordinated effort to defraud a minor of her legal inheritance through the wrongful conviction of her father, the suppression of welfare investigations, and the attempted murder of the beneficiary herself. Judge Wald's voice was the voice of a woman who had been on the bench long enough to have seen the full range of human capacity for cruelty and maintained her equilibrium through it, but whose equilibrium had limits. If what I'm reading is accurate, this is one of the most serious cases of premeditated harm to a minor that has come across my desk in 22 years. It's accurate, Stone said. How certain are you? Certain enough that I haven't slept in 6 days, Stone said, and I don't sleep badly. A pause. Then, almost imperceptibly. Mr. Mallister, I'm staying the midnight order pending a full hearing at 10 a.m. today. I need you present, I need your attorney present, and I need every piece of documentation you have brought with you. Another pause. I also need you to understand that what I'm reading suggests Ms. Blackwood may attempt to take action when she learns of this hearing. I understand, Stone said. Is Lily Dawson currently safe? Stone was already on his feet, already moving toward his cut, his keys, his boots by the door. She will be in 10 minutes, he said. He ended the call. He pulled on his cut. He went to the door and stopped and turned back because Hawk was standing in the hallway entrance to the main room, awake, dressed, cut on, keys in hand, with the expression of a man who had not been asleep either and had heard enough of the conversation to know which direction things were moving. Diesel appeared behind him, same state, same readiness. Stone looked at his brothers. I need you at the hospital, he said, not inside, outside. Understood, Hawk said. Vera finds out about the hearing at 10 a.m. She's going to make a move before that, Stone said. I don't know what kind of move. I don't know who she sends. But she's had 14 months to build this, and she's not going to let it fall apart in a courtroom without trying something first. Diesel said, We'll be there. Stone nodded. He went out into the 6 a.m. dark of Blue Ridge, Montana, and the cold hit him the way it always did. Like an argument he was going to win through the simple refusal to stop moving. And he put his leg over his Road King and felt the engine turn over under him, the familiar living vibration of it, the machine that had carried him through 15 years of motion without destination. And he understood for the first time in all those years that he was not moving away from something. He was moving toward someone. and there were people in his way. He opened the throttle. Stone hit the hospital parking lot at 7:04. The Road King's engine cut out, and the silence that followed was the particular silence of a man who has ridden hard and arrived and is now assessing the field. His breath came visible in the cold air. The parking lot was half empty at this hour. Early shift nurses, a maintenance truck, two sheriff's department cruisers that had been there since last night and whose occupants Stone clocked through the windshields in one sweep. Neither was Callum. Both were junior deputies who had been on rotation and were at the end of it, running on vending machine coffee, and the specific fatigue of men who had been asked to watch something without being told exactly what they were watching for. Stone walked through the ER entrance. The night shift nurse at intake looked up, recognized him. The look on her face was the look of someone who knew about the midnight order and had been informed of the 7 a.m. effective time and was now watching the clock and watching the door simultaneously, the arithmetic of the situation doing uncomfortable things to her expression. Stone checked his phone. 6:59. He had 4 minutes. He walked to the treatment bay. Lily was awake. She was sitting up in the gurney with her knees pulled to her chest and Biscuit held against them, and she was looking at the door, and when it opened and Stone came through, the thing that happened on her face was not the careful testing thing it had been in the early days. It was immediate. It was not quite a smile, because Lily did not distribute smiles the way other children did. She distributed them with the selectivity of someone who had learned that expressions carried cost, but it was the thing underneath a smile, the infrastructure of one. "Hey," Stone said. "You're late," she said. Stone sat in the chair. "I'm 4 minutes early." "I've been up for a long time," she said, with the precision of someone for whom the duration of wakefulness was a meaningful unit of measurement. She had been alone, he understood. However long she'd been awake, she'd been counting the time until he came, and the counting was its own kind of cost. He put his hand on the edge of the gurney. "I need to tell you something," he said. She looked at him. "I'm going to have to leave for a few hours this morning," he said. "Not because I want to. Because there's something I have to do to make sure you're safe, and when I come back—" He stopped. He was not going to make the promise before he could keep it, but he was going to make it as close to a promise as the situation allowed. "When I come back, things are going to be different." Lily looked at him for a long moment with those dark eyes that did their threat assessment continuously and automatically, the biological alarm system of a child who had needed one. "Different good or different bad?" she said. "Different good," Stone said. She considered that. Then she held Biscuit out to him. "Take him with you." Stone took the stuffed dog. He held it in both hands and looked at it and understood that he was being offered the most significant collateral a 5-year-old possessed, which was the thing she trusted most, which she was giving to the person she was choosing to trust instead. "I'll bring him back," he said. "I know," she said, in a tone that was not quite certainty and was not quite hope, but was the specific quality of something that lived between them, which was the beginning of belief. Stone put Biscuit inside his jacket, against his chest, in the same space where he had carried her through the blizzard. He left at 7:03, 1 minute before the order took effect. In the parking lot, Hawk's bike was already there. Diesel's truck. He had taken the truck because there were things this morning that might require carrying, and a Road King had limits, was parked at the far end. Both men were outside, positioned with the natural spacing of men who were covering an area rather than occupying it. Stone walked to them. "Anything?" he said. "White Tahoe," Hawk said. "Parked on the street side, 2 men, engine running. They've been there since before I arrived." "Plates?" "Alberta," Hawk said. Stone looked at him. "Canada," Diesel said, because sometimes the essential thing needed saying plainly. "Marcus Cole, the man in the restaurant photograph, the mining deal, the buyer in Vancouver waiting on clear title." Vera had not called her lawyer this morning. She had called her partner. Stone looked at the white Tahoe across the lot, visible through the gap between a delivery truck and a minivan, the exhaust from its running engine the only thing moving in the still cold air. He could not see the occupants clearly at this distance. He did not need to. He understood the purpose. "They're not here for me," Stone said. "No," Hawk said. "If the hearing at 10 goes the way Thorne thinks it goes—" "Vera loses her window," Hawk said. Whatever she's been building, it closes. She knows that. So she moves before 10, Stone said. The three of them looked at the Tahoe. How many inside? Stone said. 2 that I can confirm, Hawk said. Possibly a third in the back seat, can't tell. Stone pulled out his phone and called Thorne. She answered in half a ring. I'm on my way to the courthouse, she said. Hearing is confirmed for 10. Judge Wald is... There's a vehicle in the hospital parking lot, Stone said. Alberta plates, engine running, 2 to 3 occupants. They've been there since before 7. A silence. Stone, I'm not going to do anything illegal, he said. I'm telling you because you need to know, and because if something happens to Lily Dawson before 10 a.m., the hearing at 10 a.m. becomes irrelevant. A longer silence. He could hear Thorne's car on the other end, the sound of Montana Winter Highway and a woman thinking at speed. I'm calling Callum, she said. Callum works for the county sheriff, Stone said. The county sheriff's relationship with Judge Pratt. I'm calling Callum, Thorne said again, with the emphasis of someone who had made an assessment and was standing behind it. Roy Callum is not dirty. I've known Roy Callum for 12 years. He's stubborn, and he's suspicious, and he doesn't like your club, but he is not dirty. Stone said nothing. Make the call or I make the call, Thorne said. Either way, someone makes the call. You make it, Stone said. It carries more weight coming from you. He hung up. He looked at Hawk. We stay here, he said. Visible. Nothing more. Hawk nodded. Diesel, Stone said. Diesel was already moving, not toward the Tahoe, not toward the hospital entrance, but to a position between the two, a point of physical geometry that made the gap between the vehicle and the door something that had to go through him to close. Stone took a breath. He held the stuffed dog against his chest inside his jacket. He waited. The waiting was the hardest physical thing he had done in 15 years, and Stone Mallister had done hard physical things in 4 countries on 3 continents. The waiting required everything he had and left him nothing. Standing in a parking lot while the cold worked its way through his jacket and the white Tahoe sat with its running engine, and somewhere inside the building a 5-year-old girl held her knees to her chest and counted the time until someone came back. The waiting was the full weight of everything he had never been able to do, for Emma Marie Dawson assembled into the present tense and dropped on his chest. He stood under it. He did not move. At 8:17, Callum arrived. He came in his own car, which meant he had taken Thorne's call off duty or had not gone off duty, both of which told Stone something. He walked across the lot with his hands in his coat pockets and his concrete eyes doing their weight measurement of everything in range, and he stopped beside Stone without greeting and looked at the Tahoe. Alberta, he said. Yes, Stone said. You know who they are. I know who sent them, Stone said. Callum looked at him sideways. You going to tell me? Marcus Cole, Stone said. Estate Management and Asset Transfer, Calgary. He has a deal structured to liquidate the Dawson mineral rights to a Vancouver mining consortium. The deal closes when title is clear. Title becomes clear when the trust beneficiary is no longer, when the kid is dead, Callum said, flatly. Yes. Callum was quiet for a moment. He looked at the Tahoe. He looked at Stone. He looked at Diesel's position between the vehicle and the hospital entrance. And his expression did the thing expressions do when they are processing something that requires recalculation of a long-held position. You've been building this, Callum said, since you brought her in. Yes. Thorne has the documentation. 17 pages, Stone said, plus the Dawson prison testimony, plus Carl Whitby's trial inconsistencies, plus Tom Briggs's welfare closure records, and his relationship to Hess. Callum absorbed this. That's a lot to build in 6 days. I had help, Stone said. Callum looked at Hawk, at Diesel, at the specific quality of men who had reassigned their entire operational capacity to a single objective without being asked, simply because the objective was right, and the man they followed had decided it was necessary. Callum said, If I run those plates and find warrants, you'll find warrants, Stone said. He did not know this, but he knew Marcus Cole's professional history and he knew the probability distribution of men who drove across international borders in running vehicles to park outside children's hospitals. and he was confident. Callum walked to the Tahoe. What happened in the next 4 minutes, Stone observed from his position without moving. Callum approached the driver's side with his badge visible and his body at the angle of a man who had done this 10,000 times, and was doing it the 10,001st time with the same controlled authority. He spoke through the glass. The glass came down. Callum spoke again. There was a pause. Callum reached for his radio. 2 minutes later, a county cruiser pulled into the lot. 3 minutes after that, 2 men in dark coats were standing outside the Tahoe, with their hands visible and their expressions carrying the specific flatness of men who had run the calculation and determined that this particular iteration of the plan was over. Stone watched them put the men in the cruiser. He felt nothing dramatic. Not triumph, not relief. Those were the feelings of someone for whom the outcome had been uncertain, and Stone had not been operating in uncertainty for the last 6 days. He had been operating in the specific brutal clarity of a man who has identified the correct path and is walking it regardless of the terrain. He felt something quieter than triumph. He felt the shape of what came next. Callum walked back to him. Warrants, Callum said. Both of them. Outstanding in British Columbia. Fraud-related. He paused. The driver had a phone with recent calls to a number registered to a company called Blackwood Consulting. He looked at Stone with the concrete eyes doing something they had not done in any of their previous interactions. You got anything else I should know? Judge Harold Pratt, Stone said. Callum's jaw tightened. 1 degree. I'm not making an accusation, Stone said. I'm telling you that the midnight order barring me from this hospital was filed with a misrepresentation of fact, a claim that I was under criminal investigation, which I am not, and was signed by Pratt at midnight with the speed of a man who had been expecting the filing. Callum was very still. Thorne is challenging it at the 10 o'clock hearing, Stone said, with Judge Wald. Catherine Wald, Callum said. Yes. Callum nodded once, slowly. All right, he said, and that was all he said. But the 2 words carried the specific weight of a man reassigning a significant amount of his operational attention to a new priority, and Stone received them as such. At 9:45, Stone's phone rang. Thorne. Get to the courthouse, she said. Now. Vera Blackwood's lawyer just filed an emergency motion to move the hearing to Pratt's docket. Wald is fighting it, but she needs you here, and she needs you here now. Stone was on his bike in 40 seconds. The Blue Ridge County Courthouse was 7 blocks from the hospital, a distance that Stone covered in a manner that the posted speed limits had not anticipated, and the 2 intersections involved did not fully accommodate. He parked on the courthouse steps, not in the designated area, and went through the main doors at a pace that the security guard at the metal detector chose, after one look at the size and expression of the man approaching, not to impede. Thorne was in the corridor outside courtroom 3. She looked at him with the focused intensity of a woman who had been running on professional adrenaline since 5:48 in the morning and had found, somewhere in the accumulated hours, a second gear she hadn't known she had. Hess filed to transfer to Pratt at 9:30, she said. Wald denied it. Hess is appealing the denial. We have approximately 15 minutes before this becomes a jurisdictional argument that could tie everything up until after Lily's birthday, Stone said. Yes. What do you need from me? I need you to sit in that courtroom and be the least threatening human being you have ever been in your life, Thorne said. I need you to be so completely unremarkable that Vera Blackwood's lawyer has nothing to look at. She paused. Can you do that? Stone thought about this genuinely. I can try, he said. Thorne looked at him. That's the most honest answer anyone has given me in 20 years of law, she said, and pushed open the door to courtroom 3. Judge Catherine Wald was already on the bench. She was a woman of 60, with the particular bearing of someone who had spent decades at the precise intersection of authority and accountability and had learned to carry both without letting either one tip the balance. Her courtroom had the quality of a space that had absorbed a great deal of human desperation and managed it, and was prepared to manage more. Vera Blackwood was already at the respondent's table. She was composed. She was wearing a charcoal suit and her hair was controlled and her hands were flat on the table in front of her, in the posture of a woman who had been to courtrooms before and knew what the furniture expected of you. Beside her, Daniel Hess arranged papers with the focused energy of a man who was executing a strategy he still believed in despite the morning's developments. Stone sat in the gallery. He sat with his hands on his thighs and his back straight, and biscuit against his chest inside his jacket, and he looked at the front of the courtroom and not at Vera Blackwood. He did not look at her. He could feel the effort of not looking at her in the muscles of his jaw, and the controlled stillness of his breathing, the way you feel the effort of not doing the thing you most want to do when the thing you most want to do is the one thing that destroys everything you've built. Judge Wald began. She moved through the preliminary record with the efficient speed of a judge who had read every page of the filing and did not need it summarized. She noted the misrepresentation in the midnight order. She noted the conflict of interest in Vera Blackwood's standing as next of kin while simultaneously being party to a state litigation. She noted, with the measured voice of a woman choosing her words for the record, that the documentation provided by the appellant's attorney suggested, in her preliminary assessment, a pattern of conduct that raised serious concerns about the welfare of the minor. Hess stood to object. Wald looked at him. He sat down. Thorne presented the 17 pages. She presented Hawke's financial analysis. She presented the Carl Whitby trial inconsistencies, the Tom Briggs welfare closure record, the relationship between Briggs and Hess. She presented the photograph of Vera Blackwood and Marcus Cole at their restaurant table dated 4 days before the blizzard. Vera Blackwood did not move during the presentation of the photograph. She remained exactly as she had been, hands flat, posture controlled, expression configured for composed grief. But something changed in the room when the photograph appeared. Something molecular. The jury, there was no jury, but there was a judge, and judges have their own version of the thing that changes in a room, received it. Thorne presented Daniel Dawson's prison testimony last. She read portions of it aloud, in the flat, factual tone of a woman who understood that the material did not need performance and was in fact diminished by it. And the courtroom received the words of a man who had been in Montana State Prison for 14 months for a crime that had been built around him by the person sitting 12 feet away in a charcoal suit. When Thorne finished, the courtroom was very quiet. Judge Wald looked at Hess. "Counselor?" Hess stood. He was a good lawyer. Stone could see that, the way you can see technical skill even in an opponent. The way the argument was structured and the citations were precise and the professional presentation was maintained under conditions that were increasingly working against him. He presented Vera Blackwood's case with the competence of a man who believed, possibly correctly, that he had not known the full depth of what he was part of. He cited her standing, her clean record, her documented relationship to the child. He did not address the photograph. When he sat, Wald looked at the photograph on her desk for a long moment. Then she looked at Vera Blackwood directly. "Ms. Blackwood, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to tell you before I ask it that your answer will be part of this record. Do you understand?" Vera looked at the judge with those warm eyes. "Yes," she said. "When did you last see your niece before she was discovered on the Route 9 railroad embankment on the evening of the blizzard?" A pause. Vera began. "In your filing," Wald said, "you state that Lily Dawson was in your care and went missing in the blizzard conditions. You state that you searched for her and were unable to locate her. Is that accurate?" "Yes," Vera said. "You filed a missing child report with the county at 9:47 the following morning," Wald said. "Lily Dawson was brought into Blue Ridge General Emergency at 7:49 the previous evening. That is a 14-hour window between the hospital's initial intake and your missing child report." Wald looked at her steadily. "Can you explain that?" Vera's composure held. It held for 3 full seconds. In the 4th second, something underneath it shifted in the way Stone had watched it shift in the hospital lobby. That molecular rearrangement, that fraction of a degree recalibration of a performance under unexpected pressure. "I wasn't aware," Vera began. "You retained legal counsel at 7:14 a.m. the following morning," Wald said, "prior to filing the missing child report, prior to contacting the hospital. Can you explain that sequence?" Hess was on his feet. "Your Honor, my client—" "Sit down, Mr. Hess," Judge Wald said, in a voice that made the instruction feel like the only reasonable option available to a person in the universe. Hess sat down.
Vera Blackwood's warm, practiced expression was undergoing something that no amount of mirror rehearsal had fully prepared it for, which was the experience of a judge who had read everything, who had seen the photograph, who had done the arithmetic, and who was asking questions in the specific order of someone who already knew the answers and was building the record one answer at a time. Stone sat in the gallery. He was looking at the front of the courtroom. He was not looking at Vera Blackwood. He was looking at Thorne, who was standing at the appellant's table with her glasses on and her 17 pages in order, and he was thinking about a 5-year-old girl in a hospital bed holding her knees to her chest and counting the time until someone came back. He was thinking about what different good looked like from the inside. He was thinking about 22 days and a birthday and a trust that had been designed by a grandfather who loved his granddaughter and had never anticipated needing to protect her from his own family. He was thinking about Emma Marie Dawson. He was thinking about the specific quality of a voice that makes the word daddy sound like the most important word in any language, and how that quality did not belong to any one child but to all of them, to the particular frequency of a child who has found the person they are safe with and is telling them so in the only way they know. He was thinking about all of this when the courtroom door opened behind him. He turned. Detective Roy Callum came through the door with 2 officers. He walked to the front of the gallery, stopped, and waited. Judge Wald looked at him. "Detective Callum," she said, "you have something for this court?" "Yes, Your Honor," Callum said. He held up a folded document, arrest warrant, signed by Judge Patricia Huang, 2nd District, for Vera Marie Blackwood. He paused. Charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, misappropriation of a minor's trust assets, filing false testimony in the Dawson embezzlement trial, and 1 count of criminal endangerment of a child. The courtroom received this. Vera Blackwood's composure completed its long structural collapse in approximately 1 second. Not dramatically, not with tears or outcry, just the quiet, total dissolution of a performance that had been maintained at enormous cost and could no longer sustain the weight of what had been brought against it. Hess was on his feet again. He was already speaking. He was speaking about procedure and timing and the impropriety of an arrest being executed in a courtroom during a civil hearing, and his voice had the quality of a man covering distance because he needed to cover distance, not because the direction mattered. Wald raised one hand. Hess stopped. "The civil matter," Wald said, "is resolved. Emergency custody of Lily Marie Dawson is awarded to the county pending expedited review of the appellant's suitability as temporary guardian." She looked at Stone, directly, for the first time since the hearing began. "Mr. Mallister, do you intend to pursue formal guardianship?" Stone stood. "Yes," he said. "Do you understand that this will involve a full home study, background review, and ongoing court supervision?" "Yes," he said. Wald looked at him for a moment, the same kind of look Dr. Santos had given him, the same kind of look Thorne had given him, the reading of the structure underneath the surface, the load-bearing walls of a person's intentions. "All right," she said. She closed the folder in front of her. Callum crossed the courtroom to Vera Blackwood's table. Stone watched. He watched Vera Blackwood stand from her chair with the specific quality of motion of someone who has been running a long time and has just run out of road. He watched Callum say the words in his flat, professional voice. He watched Hess put his hand on Vera's arm and say something in her ear that she did not appear to hear. He watched her hands, those precise, deliberate hands that directed attention and managed performance and had written 7 words on a piece of paper, get placed in front of her, and the sound the cuffs made in the quiet courtroom was the sound of a plan that had been 14 months in building and had come apart in a single morning. Stone turned. He walked out of the courtroom. He went down the corridor and through the main entrance and down the courthouse steps to where his Road King was parked, where it was not supposed to be parked, and he stood beside it for a moment in the cold Blue Ridge morning. Thorne came out behind him. She stood next to him in silence for a moment, which was the appropriate response to what had just occurred. Then she said, "Home study starts next week. It's thorough. They're going to look at everything." "Let them," Stone said. "The guardianship hearing will be—" "Thorne," Stone said. She stopped. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him. Something crossed her face that was not professional and not performance.
Buy me a decent coffee sometime, she said. That courthouse machine is a crime. Stone almost smiled. He put his leg over the Road King. He called Hawk. It's done, he said. A silence. Then, in the voice of a man who had been holding a large amount of tension in his body for 6 days and was now releasing it in the most controlled manner he could manage. Done how? Arrest warrant, Stone said. Callum. Wald gave temporary custody to the county pending guardianship review. Another silence. And Lily? I'm going to her now, Stone said. He heard Hawk let out a breath. It was a small sound, but it was the sound of a man who had ridden 16 miles in a blizzard and sat in a plastic chair through the night and run record searches and built financial analyses and stood between a hospital door and a running Tahoe and had done all of it without asking why, because the why was self-evident to anyone who had spent 15 years riding beside Stone Mallister and understood what it looked like when the man finally found a reason to stop moving away. Stone hung up. He turned the engine over. He felt it under him, that living vibration, that specific aliveness, and he looked at the courthouse behind him, at the cold blue sky above Blue Ridge, Montana, at the street that led back to the hospital where a 5-year-old girl was sitting up in a gurney counting the minutes. He opened the throttle. He was 2 blocks from the hospital when his phone rang. Unknown number, Montana area code. He pulled over, answered, static, then a voice. Male, unfamiliar, with the quality of someone in a bad connection or a hurry or both. Mallister. You don't know me. My name is Eddie Cross. I work security at Montana State Prison. I'm calling because Daniel Dawson asked me to call you if something... A pause, and the quality of the pause was wrong. Was the quality of someone catching their breath after something physical. They moved him this morning. Early transfer. Solitary. No notification to counsel. No court order. Someone made a call last night, and... Another pause. Mallister. Someone inside is trying to get to him before the appeal can move. Stone's hand on the phone was very still. Is he alive? Stone said. Right now, the man said. Yes, but they've got him isolated and his lawyer can't get access, and the warden is saying it's a security protocol and... Who authorized the transfer? Stone said. A pause. That's the thing, the man said. The authorization came from the county, from a judge's office. Stone looked at the road in front of him. He thought about Judge Harold Pratt. He thought about a network built over years, patient and thorough and deep, and how you didn't dismantle a network by taking out one node, how the network rerouted, how it adapted, how it had contingencies for exactly the scenario that had just played out in courtroom 3. He thought about Vera Blackwood sitting at that table this morning, composed, performance intact, and he thought about the phone she'd had in her hand in the lobby on the first day, and he thought about the specific economy of someone who had planned for every contingency, including this one. Thorne, Stone said, not into the phone. He was already calling her on the other line, already moving, because the hearing was over. But the war was not. And Daniel Dawson, the father of the child Stone had promised different good, was in a cell in Montana State Prison with no lawyer, no contact, and someone who had just received catastrophic news in a courtroom making phone calls that ended in that direction. Stone's Road King hit the road at a speed that made the cold irrelevant, and in the distance, the mountains of Blue Ridge held their winter snow against a sky the specific blue of a morning that was not over yet, not nearly over, and had one more thing left to deliver before it was done. Thorne picked up before the first ring finished. Daniel Dawson, Stone said, Montana State Prison. Someone moved him to solitary this morning without a court order. Someone connected to Pratt's office. A silence that lasted exactly as long as it took Thorne to absorb the information and start moving. I'm on it, she said. I'm calling the state attorney general's office directly. If someone used a judge's authorization to isolate a witness during active litigation, that's what happened, Stone said. Then it's obstruction and it's federal and it's above Roy Callum's pay grade, Thorne said. Stone, go to the hospital. Be with Lily. Let me do this. Thorne, You cannot drive to a state prison and extract a man from solitary confinement, she said, with the precision of someone stating a thing that needed stating plainly. I can make 4 phone calls in the next 10 minutes that accomplish the same thing. Go to the hospital. Stone held the phone against his ear and sat on the idling Road King in the cold Blue Ridge morning and did the calculation. The same calculation he had been doing for 6 days, the one that weighed instinct against strategy, action against consequence, the thing he wanted to do against the thing that actually worked. He went to the hospital. Lily was awake and sitting up with her arms crossed when he came through the treatment bay door, and her expression was the expression of someone who had been waiting long enough that the waiting had become its own grievance. You were gone forever, she said. Stone sat in the chair. I was gone 3 hours. That's forever, she said, with the authority of someone for whom time operated differently than it did for adults. Stone reached into his jacket and produced Biscuit. Lily took the dog with both hands and held it against her chest and looked at Stone over the top of it with those dark, assessing eyes. Did you do the thing? She said. Which thing? The thing that makes it different good. Stone looked at her. At the small, serious face in the hospital gown and the monitors and the worn purple parka that had been washed by one of the night nurses and hung on the hook behind the door, small and vivid against the institutional wall. Yes, he said. I did the thing. She held his gaze for a moment, weighing it. Then she nodded once, with the gravity of a person ratifying a report they find satisfactory, and looked back down at Biscuit. Okay, she said. And that was all. That single word carrying the weight of everything she had decided to put down. Thorne called at 11:42. Stone stepped into the corridor and she spoke in the compressed, efficient tone of a woman who had made 4 phone calls and was reporting their results. State AG's office contacted the prison warden directly. Daniel Dawson has been moved back to general population and his legal access has been restored. My contact at the AG's office is opening a formal inquiry into the authorization for the transfer. A pause. The authorization did come from Harold Pratt's office. His clerk signed it. Pratt is claiming he didn't know. That claim has the life expectancy of a snow cone in July. And Dawson? Stone said. He's all right. Shaken. He's been in there 14 months, Stone. A few hours in solitary is not nothing, but he's physically fine. Another pause. He wants to know about Lily. Tell him she's good, Stone said. Tell him she named her dog Biscuit. A beat of silence on Thorne's end. The kind of silence a person makes when they receive information that is small and enormous simultaneously. I'll tell him, she said. The next 14 days moved in the way that days move after a storm. Not quickly, not easily, but with the specific quality of motion that occurs when the thing that was blocking everything has been removed and the world begins incrementally to drain back toward level. There was paperwork. There was the home study, which involved a county assessor named Gerald, who drove a sensible sedan and carried a clipboard and walked through the Iron Guardians clubhouse with the expression of a man attempting to maintain professional neutrality in an environment that was aggressively outside his professional experience. He measured rooms. He assessed the proposed sleeping area. Stone had converted the back room off the main hall, the one that had been used for storage, into something that qualified as a bedroom through the combined efforts of Hawk's carpentry skills, Diesel's capacity for moving large objects, and Reno's surprisingly precise instinct for what a child's room should feel like, which turned out to involve a specific shade of yellow paint and curtains that blocked the morning light and a bookshelf low enough to reach. Gerald the assessor stood in the doorway of the room and wrote things on his clipboard. He did not say anything critical. He did not say anything affirming either. He was a man of the clipboard. The clipboard would speak for him in the fullness of time. Stone stood in the doorway and watched Gerald write and thought about the distance between what a room looked like and what it meant, and how the gap between those two things was the entire subject of his life for the past 2 weeks. Lily came to the clubhouse for the first time on the 15th day, which was also the day the temporary guardianship order was signed by Judge Catherine Wald in a proceeding that lasted 11 minutes and generated 4 pages of documentation that Stone would keep in the inside pocket of his jacket for the next 3 months, folded carefully next to the piece of paper with the 7 words, which he had decided to keep because some things needed to be carried where you could feel them. She walked in holding Biscuit and looked at the main room with the systematic thoroughness of someone assessing infrastructure. She looked at the pool table, the bar, the neon signs, the photographs on the wall, club history going back 20 years, men in leather on various landscapes, some landscapes that were harder than others. She looked at the hallway. She looked at the door to the back. "Is that my room?" she said. "That's your room," Stone said. She walked to it. She stood in the doorway and looked at the yellow walls and the low bookshelf and the curtains. She walked in. She walked to the bookshelf and looked at the books that Reno had sourced with the same focused precision he applied to financial records. She pulled one out, a worn paperback about a dog who traveled across Canada, and looked at the cover. She looked back at Stone. "Is there more books?" she said. "We can get more books," Stone said. She put the dog book under her arm and walked to the bed and sat on it and bounced once, experimentally, and apparently found the results acceptable because she stopped bouncing and arranged Biscuit against the pillow with the seriousness of someone establishing a domestic arrangement. "Okay," she said. She said it the same way she had said it in the hospital. That single word. That ratification. Stone stood in the doorway of the yellow room and understood that the most significant thing that had ever happened to him in this building had just happened without ceremony, without drama, with the simple declarative weight of a child deciding that a place was home. Daniel Dawson's appeal was formally filed on the 19th day by a criminal defense attorney named Paul Reyes, who had been retained through a fund that the Iron Guardians established with the club's discretionary reserves, a decision made at a chapter meeting in which the vote was unanimous before Stone finished explaining the situation. Reyes was 42, relentless in the specific way of a man who had taken cases because they were right more often than because they were profitable. And he had read the Carl Whitby material and the financial records and had said, in the parking lot outside the clubhouse after their first meeting, "This is going to take time, but this is going to work." On Lily's 6th birthday, the trust activated. The activation was a legal formality, a document processed through Thorne's office that transferred administrative oversight of the trust to Stone as temporary guardian, pending the resolution of Daniel Dawson's appeal and the subsequent court determination of permanent guardianship arrangements. The document itself was not the point. The point was the morning of the birthday, which began at 6:47 when Stone heard the sound of small feet on the clubhouse floor and looked up from the coffee he had been making and found Lily standing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas with Biscuit under one arm, her hair in the state that 6-year-old hair achieves when it has been slept on, and her expression carrying the particular quality of someone who has woken on a significant day and is taking its measure. "It's my birthday," she said. "It is," Stone said. She looked at him. "How old am I?" 6, Stone said. She considered this with the gravity it apparently warranted. "That's older," she said. "That's older," he agreed. He poured her a small amount of coffee, mostly milk, enough coffee to give it the color, in the blue mug she had designated as hers in the first week, a designation that the Iron Guardians had respected with the same seriousness with which they respected territorial boundaries, which was completely. He set it on the table. She climbed onto the chair with Biscuit and wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at it with the contentment of someone whose morning ritual has been correctly executed. Outside the kitchen window, Blue Ridge was doing its February thing, cold, white, the specific silver-gray light of a winter morning that had not yet decided what it was going to be. The mountains were visible at the edge of the sky, sharp and enormous and permanent in the way that mountains are permanent, which is to say they had been there before any of this and would be there after, and their permanence was not indifferent but simply larger than the scale of human things. And on the scale of human things, a child drinking coffee-colored milk in a yellow curtain room was the most important thing currently occurring in Blue Ridge, Montana. Hawk arrived at 8. He came in the back door with a paper bag from the bakery on 5th Street and set it on the table without announcement, because Hawk Mercer did not announce things he considered self-evident. The bag contained a birthday cake, small, correctly yellow, with 6 candles and the name Lily written in blue frosting in the handwriting of the bakery woman who had been told by a large man in a leather jacket that the spelling was important and had taken the instructions seriously. Lily looked at the cake. She looked at Hawk. Hawk sat down across from her and folded his hands on the table with the straightforward dignity of a man who did not make large gestures but whose small ones carried weight. Happy birthday, he said. Lily looked at the cake for another moment. Then she looked at Hawk, with those dark eyes doing their assessment. Did you pick it out? She said. Yes, he said. You got yellow, she said. You like yellow, he said. She absorbed this. The fact of it, the implication of it, that this man had paid attention to a detail about her and had used that detail in her service without being asked and without mentioning it. She looked back at the cake. Okay, she said, and picked up her milk coffee with both hands. Diesel arrived at 9 with a wrapped present that was approximately the size of a large dog, which turned out to contain a medium-sized bookshelf, assembled, finished, painted the same yellow as her room wall, with her name routed into the wood above the top shelf in letters that were precise and deliberate, and had clearly been accomplished by someone with tools and patience and the specific kind of care that doesn't require commentary. Lily stood in front of it for a long time. You made this, she said to Diesel. Yes, Diesel said. For me, she said. Yes, he said. She ran one finger along the letters of her name, tracing them, learning the shape of her own name in wood. Nobody made me something before, she said. Not with sadness. As simple information, the statement of a fact that was being updated in real time. Diesel crouched down to her level, which was a significant structural undertaking for a man of his dimensions, and looked at her with the expression he almost never showed anyone. The one underneath the mountain permanence, the one that was simply human and careful and meant everything it showed. They will now, he said. Lily looked at him. Then she threw her arms around his neck with the full, uncalculated abandon of a child who had decided that the cost-benefit analysis of this particular embrace was worth whatever it cost, and Diesel held her with the careful enormousness of a man holding something that mattered more than anything he had held in a long time. And the kitchen was very quiet, and the February light came through the window, and the mountains were there at the edge of the sky the way they always were. The call from Paul Reyes came on a Tuesday in March. Stone was in the garage, working on a bike, which was where he was most mornings now. The shop work had resumed its rhythm alongside the new rhythm, the one that involved school runs and dinner at 6, and Lily's running commentary on the dog book she had now read 4 times and considered definitive. He had his hands in an engine when his phone rang, and he wiped them on the shop rag and answered, and Reyes's voice had the quality of a man delivering news he has been working toward for a long time and is now holding with both hands. The conviction is being vacated, Reyes said. Carl Whitby made a full statement to the AG's office yesterday. Complete, detailed, everything. He retained his own counsel and cooperated fully in exchange for reduced charges. A pause. Daniel Dawson is being released. Friday. Stone stood in the garage with the shop rag in his hand. Stone, Reyes said. I'm here, Stone said. He wanted me to tell you that he wants to meet you. Before anything else. Before the press, before the legal proceedings, before any of the custody conversations. He wants to meet the man who... Reyes stopped, started again. He says he wants to meet the man who kept his word. Stone looked at his hands, at the engine grease on the shop rag, at the garage walls with the tools hanging in the specific order Diesel had established 12 years ago and that nobody had altered since. Friday, Stone said. Friday, Reyes confirmed. He hung up. He stood in the garage for a moment. Then he walked to the door of the main room and looked through it to the kitchen table, where Lily was sitting with her bookshelf book and her blue mug and the systematic attention of someone who was on her 5th reading and was now annotating mentally, her lips moving slightly with the words. Her hair was in 2 uneven braids that she had done herself this morning with a degree of success that suggested the concept was sound and the execution would improve with practice. Stone looked at her for a moment. She looked up and found him in the doorway. What? She said. Nothing, he said. She gave him the look she had developed over the past weeks for instances where adults said nothing and meant something, a look of patient, unconvinced assessment. Your dad is coming home Friday, Stone said. Lily's face did something he had not seen it do before. It moved through several stages in rapid succession. Surprise. And then something larger than surprise,
Something that was the specific seismic quality of a piece of information that rearranges the architecture of everything around it. Her hands on the book went still. "Home where?" she said. "He doesn't have a place yet," Stone said carefully. "But he's coming to Blue Ridge. He's going to be here." Lily was quiet for a moment, those dark eyes doing the thing they always did, assessing, weighing, running the calculation. "Is he going to take me away?" she said. Stone walked to the table and sat down across from her. He put his hands flat on the table between them, the way he had put his hand on the gurney in those early days. Present, not reaching, not demanding, just there. "He's your dad," Stone said. "He loves you. He's been trying to get back to you since the day he was taken away from you."
He held her gaze. "Nothing that happens on Friday takes you away from this house, from Hawk, from Diesel, from any of it. That's already decided. The court already decided that. What Friday is getting your dad back." Lily looked at him. "Both?" she said. "Both," Stone said. She looked at her book, at the table, at the blue mug, at the bookshelf through the doorway to her room with her name in the wood above the top shelf. "Okay," she said. Friday came cold and clear, the specific clarity of a Montana March day that has decided to be honest about its temperatures and its light simultaneously. Stone drove to Blue Ridge Correctional Release Center alone, which Hawk questioned and Diesel did not question because Diesel understood the geometry of certain meetings. Daniel Dawson came through the release door at 9:14 in the morning. He was 34 and looked older and younger simultaneously. Older in the way of someone who has spent 14 months in a place that applies a specific kind of wear, younger in the way of someone who has just been handed back something they had given up on. He was slight, dark-haired, with Lily's eyes in his face, that deep, almost black-brown, that quality of continuous assessment, and he walked out into the cold morning light and stopped when he saw the Road King parked at the edge of the lot. He walked over. Stone got off the bike. They stood facing each other. Daniel Dawson looked at Stone Mallister, at the scar along his jaw, at the Iron Guardian's cut, at the size of him, and the stillness of him, and the specific quality that Stone carried, which was not threat, and was not warmth, and was something older than either of those things, something that lived in the space between the two. "She's all right," Daniel said. His voice was steady. He had been practicing this moment, Stone thought, had been saving his steadiness for it. "She's all right," Stone said. "She's been in school for 3 weeks. She's reading ahead of her level. She named her stuffed dog Biscuit, and she takes the name very seriously." He paused. "She drinks her coffee with mostly milk." Daniel Dawson's face moved. It moved the way faces move when they receive specific, small, true details about someone they love. The details that prove the person is real and present and particular, and not a general category of person being reported on, but a specific individual life that is being lived right now in the world. He looked away for a moment, at the mountains at the edge of the Blue Ridge skyline, at the winter blue sky above them. "I don't know how to," he started. "You don't have to," Stone said. Daniel looked at him. "You don't have to say anything about it," Stone said. "I found her. I kept her safe. That's what happened. That's the whole thing." A long moment. "She asked about you," Daniel said. "In the letters, the prison let us have letters, eventually. She dictated them to one of the nurses before she could write. She asked about you by name. She said—" He stopped, steadied himself again. "She said the man who found her in the snow kept his word." Stone said nothing. "I want you to know," Daniel said, "that I'm not here to— I know you've been her family. I know she's been your family. I'm not here to take her from that. I wouldn't do that. I couldn't." He looked at Stone with an honesty that had no performance in it and no strategy, just the plain face of a man who had thought about this for 14 months in a cell and had arrived at the only position that felt true. "I want to be part of it, whatever you've built. I want to be part of it, if that's something that's possible." Stone looked at him for a moment. He thought about what Lily had asked. Both? He thought about what he had said. "Come to dinner tonight," Stone said. 6 o'clock, she'll be home from school at 3:30. She'll need a few hours before she sees you. She'll need to know you're coming and have time to prepare. She prepares for things. She's methodical." Daniel Dawson almost smiled. She gets that from her grandfather, he said. My dad was the same way. Tell her that, Stone said. She'll want to know where she comes from. Daniel nodded. His jaw was working slightly, the small, muscular indicator of a man keeping a larger thing contained. 6 o'clock, Stone said. He got back on his bike. He drove back through Blue Ridge in the cold, clear March morning with the mountains sharp against the sky and the town going about its business in the way towns do. Indifferent in particular. The way all places are when you love them, and they don't love you back in any organized way, but simply exist, which is its own kind of faithfulness. He picked Lily up from school at 3:30. She came out of the building in her purple parka, a new one, properly sized, purchased by Hawk without ceremony or commentary, simply appearing on her hook one morning, with her backpack and her reading book and the expression of someone who has had a school day and is processing its events. She got in the truck. She put her backpack on her lap. She looked at Stone. Is he nice? She said. Stone looked at the school in front of him, at the other kids coming out, the other adults waiting. He's honest, Stone said, which is better than nice. Lily considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Is he like you? She said. No, Stone said. He's like you. Same eyes, same way of watching things. She absorbed this. Does he know about Biscuit? I told him, Stone said. He took it seriously. She nodded, looked out the windshield. Okay, she said. Stone drove them home. At 5:45, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table with Biscuit and her book and the blue mug with hot chocolate in it, because hot chocolate was the appropriate beverage for significant occasions, she had determined. And she was not reading. She was sitting with her hands around the mug and her eyes on the door, with the particular quality of attention of someone waiting for something they have decided to be ready for. At 5:59, there was a knock. Lily looked at Stone. Stone looked at her. You want me to get it? He said. No, she said. She got down from her chair. She walked to the door with Biscuit under one arm and her hot chocolate mug transferred to the other hand because she had decided both were necessary, and she was not wrong. She reached the door. She stopped. She looked back at Stone once, one quick look, the kind that is not a request for permission, but is a sharing of the moment before it changes. Stone nodded. She opened the door. Daniel Dawson stood in the doorway with the Montana cold at his back and the 6 o'clock dark behind him, and the specific expression of a man who has been separated from something essential for a long time and is now in the presence of it and is doing the work of not collapsing under the weight of that. Lily looked up at him. He looked down at her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Lily said, You have my eyes. Daniel Dawson's voice, when he found it, was very quiet. You have mine, he said. She looked at him for another moment with those deep eyes, doing what they always did, the assessment, the calculation, the reading of the thing underneath the thing. And then she held Biscuit out to him. It was the same gesture she had made to Stone in the hospital. The most significant collateral a child possesses, offered to the person she has decided is worth the risk. Daniel Dawson took the dog with both hands. He held it with the care of someone receiving something infinitely breakable. His name is Biscuit, Lily said. You have to take it seriously. I will, Daniel said. Okay, Lily said. You can come in. She turned and walked back to the table and climbed into her chair and picked up her hot chocolate. She watched him come through the door with the same methodical attention she applied to everything, assessing, updating, deciding. Stone stood at the edge of the kitchen and looked at the two of them, the father and the daughter, with the same eyes and the same way of watching the world, and he felt something shift in the 6 inches between his sternum and his spine, in the space that had been empty for 15 years. Not fill, not replace. Something different from both of those things. Something that did not require the absence of grief to coexist with it. He went to the stove. He put on coffee. Outside, the February dark of Blue Ridge settled over the mountains and the town and the roads and the railroad corridor on Route 9, where the snow was still deep over the place. A purple mitten had been visible for half a second in a headlight beam, a half second that had rerouted everything. The cold was the same cold. The mountains were the same mountains. The dark was the dark that came every night and had nothing to say about what happened inside the lit windows of the buildings below it. Inside the Iron Guardian's clubhouse, a man made coffee. A child asked her father if he liked dogs. A father said yes, he had always liked dogs. A child said Biscuit wasn't a real dog, but he was serious, which mattered more. A father said he understood completely. The coffee finished brewing. Stone poured 3 cups and set them on the table, 2 regular, 1 with mostly milk, and sat down in the chair that was his, that had become his over the past weeks, that sat at the particular angle that allowed him to see both the kitchen door and the hallway to the yellow room simultaneously. The angle of a man who had spent his life monitoring exits and had quietly, without deciding to, started monitoring something different. Not exits. Entrances. Hawk came by at 7. He knocked, which he didn't always do, because he understood that tonight was the kind of night that required the courtesy of a door. Stone let him in, and he sat at the table and shook Daniel Dawson's hand with the brief, assessing grip of a man taking a measure and being satisfied with it. And then he accepted a coffee and became part of the room the way Hawk always became part of rooms. Present, steady, requiring nothing. Diesel came at 7:30 with a container of food that turned out to be an actual meal. Not a gesture toward a meal, not a collection of ingredients, but a complete prepared dinner that he set on the stove without comment in the manner of a man who had decided the evening required feeding and had handled it. Reno came at 8 with specs, and the clubhouse had the quality it had on its best nights. The quality of people who had chosen each other, who kept choosing each other, who showed up at doors without being asked because showing up was the language they had, and it was sufficient. Lily ate dinner surrounded by men who had ridden 16 miles in a blizzard and sat in plastic chairs through the night and built court cases from financial records and stood between hospital doors and running cars from Alberta. And she ate with the appetite of someone who had decided that the table she was sitting at was her table, and the people around it were her people, in whatever configuration the world required them to be in. At 9 o'clock, she fell asleep in her chair with her head tilted and Biscuit in her arms. Stone carried her to her yellow room and put her in the bed and arranged the covers with the specific care of someone who has learned the shape of another person's sleep. He stood for a moment in the doorway with the lamp on low and the curtains blocking the March night and her name in the wood above the bookshelf and the sound of her breathing, which was the sound of something that had been interrupted and had resumed. He pulled the door almost closed. He stood in the hallway. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and took out the folded paper, the one with 7 words, water damaged at the edges, kept for the 2 months since a hospital waiting room because some things needed to be carried where you could feel them. He looked at it. He thought about who had written it, about what they had built and why and how long it had taken and how completely it had come apart when it met the thing it hadn't calculated for, which was a headlight and a half-second and a man who had learned that 15 years of motion without destination is not the same thing as survival. He folded the paper one more time. He walked to the kitchen. He set it on the counter beside the stove. He did not burn it, because destroying things was not what this was. He simply put it down, set it aside, left it in a place where it could be what it was, a piece of paper with 7 words that had been wrong from the moment they were written, wrong in every particular. Wrong in the foundational way of a lie that is so complete that the truth, when it arrives, doesn't argue with it. The truth simply exists beside it, and the comparison does the work. She will never be wanted by anyone. Stone looked at the paper for a moment. He picked up his coffee. He walked back to the main room where his brothers were talking in the low, unhurried way of people at the end of a long thing, and Daniel Dawson was sitting with his hands around a mug and his eyes doing the thing they did, which was his daughter's eyes doing the thing they did, and the neon sign in the window was doing its broken flicker, and the cold outside was the same cold it had always been. He sat down. Hawk looked at him. The specific look, the one that asked everything by asking nothing. Stone looked back. He picked up his coffee. Outside, the mountains stood in the dark, the way they always had, permanent and enormous and indifferent to the scale of human things. And on the scale of human things, inside a building that smelled of engine oil and coffee, and the particular warmth of people who had decided to stay, a child was sleeping with her name above her bookshelf and her stuffed dog in her arms. She was wanted. She was loved. She was home. And the man who had found her in the snow finally understood that the 15 years of emptiness he had been carrying had not been waiting to be filled. It had been waiting to be used.